Okay, so we're going to have to remove the digital port of the GameCube, the DOL001, in order to install the flex cable. So there's no real easy way of doing this unless you have the proper tools, because you have to pretty much suck up all of this to be able to do it. I've seen some people who have done it with Chip Quick, I think it's what it's called. Basically, you just flood all the pins with a low melting point solder, and you just heat them all up, and then you kind of wedge something to kind of pry this off. I'm going to use a desoldering gun that's a vacuum, has an electric vacuum to suck it up. I'm going to speed the footage so this doesn't get boring. Okay, I believe that's it. Yep, and there we go. So now that we got this cleaned out and the socket has been removed, we're going to focus our attention on the top, which is where the Flex PCB is going to go. Okay, so now that we got the Flex connector and we got the Pluto here, so some have a bracket that you can buy, you can even 3D print, so we're not worried so much about the front side. We're going to be concentrating on the back. So this quick solder flex lines up like so that you get these two here, this one here, this one at the end, and the whole bottom row minus this last one. And then we have these two here. Now this one is pretty close to this capacitor. If you happen to bridge or add some solder and it connects here, not a problem, because these two are connected anyway, so if a little solder gets there, it's not an issue. So I'm going to start by tacking this corner and then align the rest and probably tack those up there. Just going to add a little solder here just to kind of get it prepared, makes it easier to flow. Okay, that's on there pretty good. So now I can adjust, make sure everything else is good on the other points. So this is a ground point here, so likely it's probably going to take a little extra heat, but it's on there. So you don't need to have like a ball or anything like this one here. It just needs to have solder on the annular ring as well as the castellated hole. Now I'm just going to have a quick look, make sure everything looks solid. I could see some points that didn't get soldered on pretty well. I'll try to zoom in so that I can show. As you can see there, the ones right in the center, these here, if you put them at an angle, you'll see they don't really have a good connection, whereas the other ones are pretty solid. So we're just going to have to go back and redo those. Double checking my work, make sure everything's really solid joints, and there we go. So this is the prep side for the Pluto. Now on the GameCube motherboard, we already removed the socket, and this is going to solder onto this here. So the way this works is this is going to be soldered on this way, and we're going to fold this over on itself so that this will sit like so. So this is a prototype, so it's a little bit more rigid. With the production ones, the ones that will likely be available on my website, will be much more flexible. And I'm still uncertain about these 2 points, if I'm going to keep them there or move them somewhere else. But the installation process is exactly as I'm showing in this video. I'm also going to have a line here so you know where to bend. This way you can line this up flat. So to catch this pretty good on video, I'm going to face it this way so you guys can see. So we should prep some of these pads. Like we're going to be soldering onto this. This is a ground, so it's going to take some heat to really heat up and melt that solder that we're going to put on there. Okay, so I got a little bit of solder on both. Those are just there for basically mounting. So we're going to try to line up do another bend. We need to line up the castellated holes, which are the half circles on the flex, with the holes on the motherboard. And we also have the ground here, which is just basically going to be for mounting. So I'm going to heat up the solder that we just put, try to get it molten so I can push it onto the flex. It's kind of on there. Try to get the other side so we have this nice and tacked, and then the rest of the job will be really easy. Okay. If you have flux and you want to use flux, feel free to. It might help the installation a little better for you. So the best method is to kind of get some solder on each of these pads on the Flex PCB. And this way we can just introduce a little bit into the annular rings of the motherboard, and it'll just flow much easier. If you notice, hopefully you can see it on camera, as soon as I heat both the flex pad and the annular ring on the motherboard and introduce a little bit of solder, the solder just like flattens, sinks into the hole, which is what we want. So we know there's a solid connection there. Okay, so from me looking at it from my angle, probably not so easy to see on the camera, everything's got a solid connection. Just this one here, I think I'm going to just touch up a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty much the majority of it. So now this is supposed to kind of fold up. Again, because this is rigid, it's a little bit more work. Than the final version once you guys actually have that. So this is going to be a lot more flexible. So now the 5 volt we get from this point here, these two, and the control is one of these test points. So I'll have to look it up down here, one of the test points down here. So all it is after is just the 2 wires. One to 5 volt and one to the control. So I'll look that up real quick, and then I'm going to come back and show it off so you guys know exactly where to solder the wires. Okay, so we're going to solder the 2 wires. I already looked up the information. 5 volts is these 2 pins here. Just adding some fresh solder. Okay. Gonna tin the pads. So for the 5 volt, I'm using a, I believe it's around 20 gauge. A little thick, but something like 26, maybe 24 will be more than good enough for this. So I did pre-tin the wire, otherwise it would be pretty difficult, especially with how thick this is. So remember, this is going to be like so. So once it's in the shell, okay. So now the control point is actually this one here, which I'll put an image up on screen so you guys know exactly which one it is. Even though it's like the third one from here, 1, 2, 3, and if you look at where it says P3 here, it's right in the middle. So right now we don't have the heatsink, so when we do put the heatsink, you're going to have to take that in mind when you're routing this wire. So I'm probably just going to go this way, and between here, between these two RAM chips, and I believe this the video card. Turning it around so it's a little easier for me. Might want to use some Kapton tape or something just to hold it in position, because once you put the heatsink, it's going to have the thermal pads, and you don't want to get this, you know, on top of the video or the RAM here. You want to keep it away from everything as possible, so there's plenty of clearance. Alright, and that should be it. I'm going to assemble this into the shell and give it a test, and hopefully everything's kosher. So thanks for watching, and I should have this by the time you see this video on my site. Again, the board is a prototype, so it's a little stiffer. I used Oshpark. So the ones that I'm going to have made are going to be a lot more flexible. So it should be a much simpler, or not simpler, but easier install, because this will be a lot more flexible. Alright, thank you.